thank you everyone for joining us today. I am so honored to have with me Dr. Patricia Ramsey, president of Medgar Evers College in Brooklyn, New York. Welcome, Dr. Ramsey. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to share this afternoon.
Absolutely. So Dr. Ramsey, you are the 6th president of Medgar Evers College, the first woman and the first scientist. You have had an illustrious career, academic journey, and professional journey, and you have just been such an inspiration and influential to women and women of color. So again, I thank you for being here. I want to ask you if you can talk a little bit about your career journey and the challenges that you faced along the way.
Well, thank you. That's quite a question. Well, one of the things that I would like to share. I grew up in rural Surrey County, Virginia, and we had a biology teacher that challenged us. And it was because of that teacher that 5 of us majored in biology in undergrad school, where I went on to Norfolk State University. And there I had a professor as a freshman who challenged us even more because he required that we get articles to help him with his publications. And so that's what originally got me very interested in research and pursuing graduate degrees. A wonderful education at Norfolk State. And as a matter of fact, in my PhD program, one of the professors said, "Where did you get such a strong background in genetics?" And I was proud to say Norfolk State University. But being a female and being a woman of color, and particularly an African-American woman, it met its many challenges. Oftentimes I was the only Black person or the only female in many of the audiences in which I found myself. But because of the strong, I would say, foundation that I received through my parents and my dad, always testing me and saying, "Pat, whatever it is that you believe, you stick with it." And so he would do these challenges. And so therefore in school, I would ask just a lot of questions. And I never allowed myself to feel lesser than. I would always find ways to be able to advance, I would say, the cause of my people. For a while, I felt I was carrying the weight of my people on my back, but that was just too much weight, I realized. And so I said, well, I'm not the only one out here that's doing this. But what it did for me is to say that you need to try to make a way for others. And so for me, it's always been about what can I do to make a difference. And so after receiving my PhD, I went into full-time teaching, and in that role as a professor, I would always say to my students, is there anything you've ever wondered about? And if there is something that you've wondered about, if it's something that you truly can test, then I think you should explore your wonderment. And so I borrowed that idea, actually, that whole wonderment word, which is not really a word, from a friend who says, well, just, we students don't explore their wonderment enough. And so I started first with students that were in my class. And these students were in my botany class. And I said, well, is there anything you've ever thought about that you've heard people say, but you didn't know the answer? And so, of course, the answer is yes. And so I never will forget, we were talking about, and you connect things in history, when you think about Harriet Tubman and how she came north, and you heard the stories about, well, you know that the moss grows on the north side of the tree. And so the students say, I've always wondered about that. And so then they went out and they actually checked a number of trees on the campus and discovered, well, it is true that the moss grows on the north side of the tree, but they also discovered that if the trees are very close to salt water, the moss grows on the opposite side. Because of course, the plants have a way of making sure that they survive. And so that is really a way of the plant protecting itself. So with moss, because they need water in order for them to be able to reproduce themselves, then it puts itself in an environment where they will have the moisture that they need. So little things like this. And so they started wondering about all kinds of things. Well, you have these Ivy League institutions. Is it really true that, you know, it's the ivy, and what does the ivy do to the buildings? All those types of things my freshman students would ask. So I decided, okay, I don't have any graduate students to work with me. I'm going to use my freshman and sophomore students as my research team. And so I had about 5 students, did not choose them based on them having A's, but choose them based on them having an interest in the research. And so those young people were phenomenal. We went all over the nation with them presenting papers. Whatever question that they had, we would try to make sure that they were able to respond to whatever that question was. And so we did publications and all types of things. But one of the things that happened, I was trying to do something to help a school division because it was a very poor school division in Virginia. And so I started writing proposals to try to assist them in getting funding. And in doing so, someone that I met at a picnic or a cookout said, I think you need to speak with the president of Norfolk State, which never occurred to me to do. And so I said, I'm not doing that. Who do I think I am? Well, the person saw me again and said, have you talked to the president of Norfolk State? I said, okay, I'm going to do it this week, which is what happened. And so in going there and speaking with, at that time, the president was Dr. Harrison B. Wilson, passed away in 2019, had been the president for 22 years. So when I went there telling him about what I was doing for school divisions and all of this, he said, I think that you have come at the right time. And that's kind of how I was actually introduced to administration. And so I ended up being hired as the Associate Vice President for Development at Norfolk State. I interviewed about 5 times. And the reason that I interviewed so many times, I learned from the Vice President that hired me, he didn't want to hire a woman. Now, many people may think, oh, that's so terrible, but he had a different reason for not wanting to hire a woman. All of the people in his office were female, and he thought that bringing in one more female might really kind of upset the mix, if you will. But a year later, he said it's one of the best decisions he could have ever made. And so I tend to, wherever I go, try to make sure that people work together, because working together is the way that we achieve whatever the goal is that we are trying to achieve. And so in working in that Office of Development, because I had been faculty, developed a very good relationship with faculty. So the grants that those faculty members generated, that went up. And they felt that they had an advocate in that Office of Development. Well, Dr. Wilson retired, the administration's changed, so I went back to the classroom. And in going back to the classroom where I was teaching in the biology department as an associate professor, I discovered that the students had changed. And what do I mean by that? The students didn't seem to be as knowledgeable as they were some years ago, because of course things had changed in the school divisions. And I said, well, if the students have changed, that means that instruction needs to change. And so I tried numerous things in my classes. I had lecture classes. The largest class was 90 students. And in that class, I had those students actually exploring their wonderment. And I remember the Ebola virus being one that some of the students were very curious about. And they actually wrote a skit and had the student passing out and all these things. In a class of 90 students, we were doing this type of thing. And I said, I can only impact the students that I get. I used to have about 225 students per semester. I said, I want to impact instruction on a wider scale. So I decided, though I had not been in the academic side of the house administratively, to apply for chief academic officer positions. And all of the positions that I applied for, I actually became a finalist. But I have a heart for historically Black colleges and universities. And so I was actually on an interview at a predominantly white institution as a finalist when the president of Shaw University called to tell my husband, and he told my husband basically, because I was not there, that he was offering me the job at Shaw University as vice president for academic affairs. And he was sharing it with him because he was going out of the country and wanted me to get that information. And so that's how I started my chief academic officer track, where I became the chief academic officer at Shaw University as my first chief academic officer position in the middle of the academic year. I started in January. And in a very short period of time, we had done a number of things to change that institution around, restructured, and the current president of Shaw University told me, we are still using some of the things that you put in place when you were at Shaw. And so from Shaw, and in this business, you have transitions taking place. And whenever you are in the administration, if you're a vice president or at that level, it is more than likely that the persons coming in are going to bring their own team. New president came in because the president that hired me retired, brought in a team. However, he did not bring in a chief academic officer. But I knew that I was really not fitting in well with that team that he brought in. And so I began to look at other positions, other opportunities, because I had been contacted by a search firm. And one of those opportunities was the provost position at Bowie State University in Maryland. And so I was selected from a national pool, became one of the final three, and I was selected as the provost at Bowie State. And for me, it's all about the students. What can you do to make a difference in the lives of these students? And so I recall being at the meeting with the students, and one of the students was a nursing major. And she said, I want to know what you're going to do to get us more full-time faculty in the nursing program. And that was one of the first things I began to work on when I became the provost. And that department went from a department of 2 faculty and the rest adjuncts to a department of all full-time faculty with the exception of the clinical faculty, which were the people who were teaching the nursing students when they would go out for the clinicals. And so I remember that student even to today, and it's just really interesting how certain things in your life you can remember. So we did a lot of things at Bowie State University, very progressive things. Had no idea going in that I would become the interim president there, but the president who hired me there resigned. And I became the interim president because the chancellor of the system asked me if I would serve in that capacity, which I was, of course, glad to do. And so even though it was a short time, one of the things I focused on the students, and communication is key. And so I was told that we would not meet our enrollment that fall. And so therefore it was going to impact the budget. So I called I called all of the staff together. I said, we're going to have a family meeting. And I started asking them questions about how many students have you recruited to the institution? If you're in admissions, don't say anything. And so I learned that people didn't really understand what their role was at the institution. They had a job to do. They knew how to do their job very well, but did not know how it connected to other things. By the time we left that meeting, people were so energized that staff volunteered on the weekends And we ended up exceeding our enrollment goal for that fall. And so that is one of the things that I feel so good about, because I, as the president, could not do this alone. It required all of the people working together such that we could achieve the goal of the institution, and such that we could have the students to be able to matriculate at the institution and ultimately earn their degree. And hopefully it was to be in 4 years. But during that time, something else happened, because at the institution, some of the students did not meet the requirements for admission. And so we had a summer bridge program. And in that program, there were 30 students who still did not meet the requirements at the end of the bridge program. And so a parent called me and said, "Can you please do something to allow my son to be admitted?" I said, "I cannot break the rules. If I do it for your son, I will have to do it for all of the students." So I thought about it, and in that group of 30, 28 of them were African American males. And I said, now, what is going to happen to those young people? It is too late in the year for them to even get into the community college. I need to try to come up with something. So I came up with this idea. I'm going to do a pilot. And this pilot is to bring these students in and to give them the courses that they need developmentally. They will not be admitted into the institution. They will come in as a cohort, and such that it doesn't cost the institution anything, I used administrators who had the expertise in those areas to serve as their faculty members and their instructors. And so I taught biology. My assistant taught the freshman seminar class. A lady in the health area taught the health. She was an administrator. She taught the health course. And one of the persons that I had in my office as a faculty fellow, his area was communications. He taught the communications. So we were able to get these students in these courses where they actually were non-matriculating students. And as non-matriculating students, that meant they had to pay for this because you could not use financial aid, but you got credit for those courses as non-matriculating students. With any institution, they have this category called special student status. Did this pilot, but I knew it would not be successful without the support of the parents. So I called a meeting of the parents and I said, I will do this if I'm going to get your support. That means that we are going to have to meet on a regular basis such that these students can get what they need in order to be successful. You would have thought that it was the end of a revival meeting because the parents were so excited and they came up with the funding to support these students. The program got such attention because here we are bringing in all of these African American males, one Latinx male, and this is a program that is being viewed as one that is successful. I had my special assistant at the time walking and saw that there were these students on in the cafeteria or in the student center. It was the student center. And she said, "What are you all doing here? You're supposed to be in class. Get your butt to class." I mean, this is how we dealt with these students. All of those students finished that program except one. And one of them, the young lady that was in the program, finished so well that she was invited to come to Temple University to be a student there, which she did go because, of course, they made it very attractive for her to go. But guess what? She came back. She said, it's just not the same. And so for me, it's all about the students. And I know I can be a little bit long-winded, but there's so many opportunities. And as I think about involving students, in their success, I would have something called Chat with the Provost, and the students would come in. At first, it was kind of a gripe session, but then it kind of morphed into what I call the think tank. And it's because of a freshman student who said, Dr. Ramsey, I think it would be great if you would get this software for students that would enhance their learning, because my parents bought it for me and it was very helpful to me. And this student was a computer science major. And so I got with the people in IT. I asked them to kind of look at this software and to see if it's something that would fit with our system. They said they thought it would fit well. And so we purchased the software. Well, because of that, Microsoft was so interested that an administration listened to students that they contacted us to do a case study. And here you have a freshman student with administrators talking to the people at Microsoft such that they could present their case study report at their meeting that they were having that fall or the end of that summer in San Diego, California. And so that's just a little bit about what happened up to that point of me being the interim president. And then, of course, at Bowie State, I served in many capacities. So provost, interim president, department chair, where I was able to increase the research by more than 200% over the previous year, because it's all about the students and their success. And had the opportunity to be an advocate for a new building at Bowie State University to house nursing, state-of-the-art facilities in nursing. And unfortunately, the nursing faculty member that was on the committee with me at the system level passed away while we were actually interviewing architects. But I was a true advocate for the nursing students in that program. And so with regard to that building, when they wanted an advocate to the new governor, who the administration had changed to now Governor Hogan, they wanted me to speak to the governor. Well, when I was speaking to the governor about it, I said, this is where we teach microbiology for our nursing students. I said, there's no gas in this room. This room was designed for physical science. We need a new building because we need to be able to produce more nurses in accordance with the Maryland State Plan. They need more nurses. And so the Capitol Gazette caught a picture of me with my hand up, and the governor is looking and the president is standing there, me talking about the need to improve these facilities, to get new facilities so that we could include the nursing students in their own area with state-of-the-art, not only facilities, but technology. So this new building, it does exist now at Bowie State University. It was completed in 2017. It actually opened in 2017. And I was involved from the selection of the architect to selection of the wall covering. And then I knew that what I was called there to do was done. And it was time for me to move on. I just knew it in my spirit. And so I moved on from there to Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. But while at Lincoln University, I was contacted by the people at Bowie to say, we're having a ribbon cutting and we're inviting you. And so I was able to go back there for that ribbon cutting with all of the dignitaries from the legislature and from the governor's office, and was recognized by the president of the university, who is now retired, Dr. Medgar. And he said to them, he said, she was our former department chair for natural sciences. She was our former provost. She was our former interim president. So I had all those jobs in addition to being a tenured faculty member there. Well, quickly after I arrived at Lincoln University, one of the board members said that he had a friend that he wanted me to meet, and asked if I had an interest, because the friend was interested in looking at medicinal cannabis, because Pennsylvania at the time was about to put a legislation in place that would allow the growing of medicinal cannabis. So I met with the gentleman and his partners. It was a Black-owned firm, a Black-owned company, and it was all males. And that was in and of itself phenomenal to me. I had not met 3 Black males who actually were owners of a company, a startup like that. And so with that, I said, okay, we can help you, but this is how I want you to help us. So we developed an MOU with them. And when they submitted their license application, they won the highest score in the state of Pennsylvania. And I was involved with them with that project. And so coming here to Medgar Evers College, which I am now the president, it's so interesting how life is and those experiences that you have, how they prepare you for what it is that is your purpose. Because coming here to Medgar Evers, within a few weeks, there was a proposal presented for a minor in cannabis education. And surely enough, I was able to talk to them about my experience with doing the medicinal cannabis work in Pennsylvania. And they knew in me they had an advocate. And so very recently, we were featured on Channel 12 News here in Brooklyn, because we are the first institution in the City University of New York to offer a minor in cannabis education. And that is kind of the trajectory that I have made. True, there have been bumps along the way. Many bumps having to do with the fact that I was a female. Probably more bumps because of being a female than because of being Black. And these bumps did not occur in any one particular type of institution, because I experienced it at each institution where I found myself. And so, but you have to learn that you don't succumb to whatever it is that people try to do to you, or and sometimes being successful doing to you. But you have to develop thick skin and you move on in spite of what it is that folks try to do. And so you mentioned about me being the first female and the first scientist. I didn't realize how significant that was until I actually arrived here. And each audience that I find myself, it is applauded when folks say, she's the first woman to be president of Medgar Evers College. And one of the dean in the science and health and technology area here says, and the first scientist. So that's just I know that's a lot, but that's kind of the path that I've taken. And someone said to me, well, why would you, with your background in STEM, why would you want to be an administrator? But I think that my story kind of explained the whys of that, because a lot of times people try to put you in a box and they think that, well, just because you're an administrator, then you can't do this other thing. But actually you can. You can be an administrator and you still can have a focus on research. And as a matter of fact, as an administrator, I had a team of students when I was at Bowie State who needed an extra credit in order to graduate. And so I had them to explore their wonderment, but it was really more exploring my wonderment, because it was during the fall semester. And I said, there's this old wives' tale that if you want to get rid of the cold or the flu, you use this particular concoction of honey, lemon, alcohol, and so, and of course, it's called a hot toddy. Well, the students were like, well, what's that? I said, I'm not going to tell you what a hot toddy is. You have to look it up, come up with a research design, present it to me. And so they did that. They were so excited to find that there was actually efficacy against the growth of bacteria with this hot toddy, and they tested it hot, and I said, tested both hot and tested cold. And so they did both, and they found it was just with the hot toddy that they were able to kill the bacteria. And so to this day, I have a picture of the ring, the inhibition zone that the students were able to capture as a result of that. I did that, things like that as an administrator. And so, and also the teaching, I still have done. The only time that I have not done teaching is when I was at Lincoln University. I did not have a class assigned in any structured way, but a teacher is who I am, so I do it every chance that I get, no matter who the audience is. And so I know that's a long answer to your question, but the last thing I want to say about that is that in this journey, I have just really met some phenomenal people who I still stay in touch with. And at many of these institutions where I have been previously, well, actually, as a matter of fact, all of them where I have been previously as the chief academic officer, I am still getting calls and text messages from people from the institution asking me, well, how do you do this? Or how do you do that? Or what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? And so every place I go, I try to have great relationships with people, try to put myself in their footsteps, in their shoes rather, to say, well, how would I feel if this happened to me? And so I always respect people and try to treat them well. And so there's a young man that I saw that he was very tenacious. Nothing scared him. I said he would be ideal to serve as director of research and sponsor programs, a new office that I established at Shaw. He has gone on to do great things. He is a presidential fellow, faculty member at Texas A&M University. And the thing is, you can't worry about, minimizing whoever it is that you are. He never minimizes who he is, and he has generated millions and millions of dollars. In 18 months of us establishing that office at Shaw, we had brought in more than $10 million to that university. And so the relationship still exists. So as a result of that, and the work that we had done, I was recognized by Minority Access as a role model in helping to increase the number of underrepresented minorities in health careers and STEM. So hopefully you can use some of this information to help your audience.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ramsey. And I can tell that teaching is your passion, because I am actually being educated right now as you're talking, and I can see why your students love you, so much. There were a few things that resonated with me as you were talking. Explore your wonderment. I mean, that is just so inspirational just in itself, to have someone invest in you, to encourage you to explore what you're thinking about so that you can research it. You said, I never allowed myself to be lesser than. I think that is so important for all of us, especially for our students watching. It can be so intimidating to be in various circles, in circles that may not look like us. But that point that you made about, never let yourself be less than, know who you are and what you bring to the table. That is just so important. The other thing that resonated with me is when, you said, you try to make a way for others. And that is quite evident in your story as you were talking, your journey, as you were sharing, all of the, well, probably not all, but a lot of your accomplishments and challenges along the way. You answered really all the questions, most of the questions that I had, but you hit on a lot of points in terms of taking risks and, the lessons that you learned, along the way, and your outcomes speak for themselves, and it's a testament to your leadership and what you've been able to accomplish along the way. And then finally, before I ask you a follow-up question, the other thing that resonated with me as you were talking about going on several interviews, I think about that because many of us have done that, and it's so easy to get discouraged, but to your point, there's lessons that you can learn along the way. Each time, you go on those interviews, there's something to learn about ourselves each time, we do that. And you did not give up, and you took those risks. And you also said, that those experiences prepare you, for what is your purpose. And you are now, again, and I'm going to say it again because it just warms my heart to say it, the sixth president of Medgar Evers College, the first woman and the first scientist. Yeah. So, those experiences prepared you to lead and to develop what is now your new medicinal cannabis program at the college. And so one of the things I want to shift to is STEM and health and social equity. And you talked about it a bit, but bridging the gap there, because many industry leaders are not necessarily understanding of how to bridge that gap between, STEM and health to improve equity, health and social equity. And to that point, underrepresented minority populations, as you know, remain disproportionately affected by poor health and socioeconomic outcomes. And as our population continues to increase in diversity, the U.S. will continue to need underrepresented minorities in STEM to enter in academic and research fields to advance health and social equity. So as a college president who happens to be a scientist, can you discuss examples of how the STEM community can partner with the healthcare sector in creating innovative solutions to advance health and social equity? I know that was a mouthful, but I think you know where I'm going with it.
Yeah. Well, I think that education actually is key to all of it. I think that when we look at health disparities in this nation, a lot of it has to do with the fact that people really aren't educated as to who they are. They're not educated about their bodies. They're not educated about how the atmosphere or the water affects them. And so I think we need to do a better job educating. And I believe that now the corporate sector is beginning to see this, and there are opportunities for us to work with the corporate sector in that regard. But one of the things, even before I knew that I was selected as the president of Medgar Evers College, I looked at what was happening in New York, and I know that Medgar Evers College has social justice in its DNA. As you know, it's named for that great civil rights activist, Medgar Wiley Evers. And so we are an institution that definitely should be a model of social justice for this nation. And I've said that in my vision statements to the campus and to anybody who will listen. And so there's opportunity as institutions of higher learning for us to actually come together with the corporate sector as partners, because we all should be on the same page. as to wanting to have a healthy nation, because of course, if you have a nation where everyone has some medical illness, it's going to be very difficult for us to move forward economically, because it's very costly, of course. If a person has a particular illness, it's much more costly than if you educate people about how to be healthy, to stay healthy, educate them about the environment and those things that might be insults to the environment that impact them. Water. Just today, I was hearing about another city that has been impacted with regard to the water and lead being in the water. And so people just need to be educated on these things. As a STEM professional and particularly a botanist, I know that in this world, we have a natural product that is there for whatever besets us, if it's by natural means. And so years ago, plants were actually used as medicinals. And people who are some of our ancestors, they knew how to use these plants in ways that warded off many of the illnesses that beset us today. And I contend that for anything out there, if it was caused by something natural, and I keep saying that because some things do get created by us, then there is a plant somewhere in the world that actually can combat this. And so when you talk about STEM and industry coming together, or corporations coming together, I think about my experience as a visiting scientist at a pharmaceutical company some years ago. And they were doing all of these different tests in the laboratory. And then they said, oh, this would be so great as a replacement for insulin, because they were getting quite a bit of glucose uptake when they were doing these experiments. Well, I come in there, I'm a botanist, I'm looking at things from a different kind of perspective. And I said, well, how do you know that you don't have this uptake because something is happening to the cell wall? The cell membrane, I'm sorry. And so they said, well, we hadn't thought about that. I said, well, why don't you let me look at the cells after you have injected this particular compound. Let me look at the cells under the electron microscope and see what's actually physically happening to these cells. And they said, well, that's your area. We don't know anything about that. They allowed me to do it. And so it was really interesting that when I looked at the cells under the electron microscope, they had blisters. Well, you know that if they have blisters, where those blisters are, it's going to be a different rate of migration than if there are not blisters. And so they would not have known this had I not said, let's look at the cell, because they're looking at everything through a biochemical eye. And so I said to them, I said, look, I would like to see us use natural products to be able to do some of this testing. But what they said to me was, it is way too costly for us to be able to do that. This was a number of years ago. Now, fast track to today. What are we doing? We are using a plant product from cannabis. And one of the things that I said to the reporter when he was speaking to me, I said, and the plants didn't grow this chemical for us to use. The plants are actually producing this secondary compound for their own defense. But it just so happens that people over the centuries have known that plants have efficacy and have used them for various and sundry reasons. And so I would say education is key to us actually addressing health disparities in this country, and even in producing more people in the health related fields. because some people shy away from the health-related fields because you have to take chemistry and biology, which people always, well, I'm just afraid of those STEM courses. Well, education, again, we have to change that mindset, and then we have to start in elementary school. If we start in elementary school, shifting that paradigm, I think that we will have more people who will decide to go into a major, a STEM major, and then to go into STEM careers or health-related majors and health-related careers.
Well, Dr. Ramsey, thank you so much. Believe it or not, we are out of time.
Oh.
But you have left us with some pearls of wisdom and some knowledge that we can pass on to others, and for students that are interested in STEM fields. And so you gave us all of that within this past hour, and I just want to thank you again so much for being here. I wish we could do a part 2, because I would love to pick your brain on the different plants and what they do. As a nurse, I'm just fascinated by that. So we'll have to do another session at another time. But thank you so much for being here, Dr. Ramsey.
Well, thank you. And of course, I'd be glad to do another session with you. But thanks a lot for the opportunity to share my passion.
Absolutely.